Rain hammered the empty highway outside Birmingham, Alabama, long after midnight. The storm moved slowly across the state line, covering the road with silver fog and restless wind. Judge Maya Bennett tightened both hands around the steering wheel and stared ahead through exhausted eyes. She had spent 12 straight hours in a federal courthouse in Montgomery before driving north alone. Her shoulder ached from tension. Her coffee had gone cold nearly 2 hours earlier. Every mile felt heavier than the last. The old gas station appeared suddenly beside the highway like a forgotten memory. One flickering neon sign buzzed against the darkness. 2 fuel pumps stood beneath a rusted metal canopy. The convenience store windows were covered with faded beer advertisements and handwritten notices. Maya almost kept driving. Then she glanced at the fuel gauge resting near empty. She pulled beside the pump and stepped into the cold rain. Her black wool coat clung to her shoulders while distant thunder rolled across the countryside. The station felt abandoned except for a sheriff's cruiser parked near the entrance. Its headlights cut across the pavement like searchlights. Deputy Derek Shaw exited the store carrying a cup of coffee and a look that immediately hardened. He was tall, broad, and confident in the careless way certain men became after years without consequences. His partner, Deputy Cole Briggs, leaned against the cruiser several feet behind him, younger and visibly less certain. Shaw watched Maya insert her credit card before speaking. "You lost, Ma'am?" he asked. Maya barely looked up. "Just buying gas." Shaw walked closer anyway. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his hat onto the concrete. "This station closes soon. The pumps are still running." "That's not what I meant." The words settled heavily between them. Maya recognized the tone immediately. She had heard versions of it her entire life. The language changed. The intention never did. Briggs shifted uneasily near the cruiser. "Derek, come on." But Shaw ignored him. "You from around here?" he asked. "No. Thought so." Shaw glanced at her luxury sedan with quiet suspicion. "Long way from downtown Atlanta." Maya slowly removed the fuel nozzle and met his eyes for the first time. "Is there a reason you're questioning me?" The deputy smiled without warmth. "Depends. You hiding something?" "Only exhaustion." Shaw stepped closer until the smell of coffee and cigarette smoke mixed with rain between them. People passed through this county late at night carrying drugs, cash, all kinds of trouble. "I'm a tired woman driving home." "You got identification?" Maya's expression remained calm, though irritation tightened beneath her composure. "Am I being detained?" The question changed something in Shaw's face. Men like him preferred fear over confidence. Her steady voice embarrassed him in front of Briggs. "You lawyers always ask that," he muttered. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. She had not mentioned her profession. Shaw noticed the reaction and smirked. "Educated guess. I don't consent to random searches or intimidation," Maya said quietly. Thunder cracked across the highway. For one long moment, nobody moved. Then Shaw grabbed her forearm hard enough to twist her sideways against the car. "Derek!" Briggs snapped sharply. Maya gasped from the sudden pain. "Take your hands off me. Stop resisting. I'm standing still." Rain soaked her hair while Shaw forced her against the vehicle. The fuel nozzle clattered loudly onto the pavement beside them. Briggs took several hesitant steps forward, but stopped again. "Relax," Shaw said coldly. "You people always make this harder." Maya felt anger rising beneath the shock now. Not fear, not humiliation, something deeper, something older. Finally, Shaw released her with a rough shove. "Get back in your car," he said, "and leave this county." Maya steadied herself against the door and stared directly at him through the rain. She memorized the badge number on his chest. She memorized Briggs standing silently beside the cruiser. She memorized every word. Neither deputy noticed the leather case lying open on the passenger seat. Inside rested tomorrow morning's court docket from the United States District Court in Birmingham. At the top of the first page appeared one important name: Deputy Derek Shaw. Maya Bennett reached Birmingham shortly after 2 in the morning. The city skyline shimmered through rain and low clouds, while exhausted truck drivers drifted across the interstate beside her. By the time she parked outside her historic brick townhouse near Highland Park, her shoulder throbbed beneath her coat sleeve. She entered quietly, dropped her keys onto the hallway table, and stood motionless for several seconds inside the dark silence of home. The house smelled faintly of cedarwood and old books. Outside, rainwater tapped softly against the windows. Normally, she would have gone straight to bed. Instead, instinct pulled her toward the dining room table, where tomorrow's files waited inside a leather briefcase. Maya loosened her hair, poured herself a glass of water, and opened the federal docket with practiced precision. She reviewed cases the way surgeons reviewed scans before difficult operations. Calmly, carefully, without emotion. Then she saw the names: Deputy Derek Shaw, Deputy Cole Briggs, Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department. Maya slowly lowered the page. The lawsuit involved allegations of unlawful traffic stops targeting black motorists across several counties in northern Alabama and western Georgia. Civil rights violations. Extortion, missing evidence reports. Excessive force complaints quietly buried by local supervisors, and Derek Shaw sat directly at the center. For a moment, the room became completely still. Maya looked down at the faint bruise darkening along her forearm where Shaw had grabbed her hours earlier. A hot pulse of anger moved through her chest, not because she felt personally insulted. She had survived far worse moments than roadside humiliation. No. What unsettled her was how ordinary it had been for him. He never asked who she was. He never cared. He saw a black woman alone at night and assumed power belonged entirely to him. That certainty disturbed her more than the bruise. Maya slept less than 2 hours. At 6:30, she stood before her bathroom mirror, fastening pearl earrings beneath tired eyes. Her charcoal suit hung sharply against her posture. She covered the bruise with makeup, though not perfectly. Some injuries deserved visibility. The federal courthouse downtown buzzed before sunrise. Lawyers hurried through metal detectors, carrying boxes of documents and steaming coffee cups. Television vans lined the curb outside after local reporters learned the hearing involved possible police corruption. Inside courtroom 7, Deputy Derek Shaw entered, wearing his uniform like armor. He looked rested, confident, amused. Shaw leaned back beside his attorney while sipping coffee and speaking loudly enough for nearby reporters to hear. "These cases always fall apart," he said. "Couple complaints, couple headlines, then everybody moves on." Briggs sat beside him stiffly, avoiding eye contact. The union attorney lowered his voice carefully. "Today isn't the day for arrogance." Shaw smirked. "Nobody's touching me." Across the room, plaintiff attorney Nathaniel Cross organized witness binders with quiet focus. Unlike Shaw, Cross looked deeply prepared. Mid-50s, grey suit, former Marine, the kind of lawyer who rarely raised his voice because he never needed to. At precisely 9 o'clock, the courtroom deputy announced the judge. "All rise." Every chair scraped backward. Derek Shaw lifted his coffee cup casually while turning toward the bench. Then the cup slipped from his hand. Coffee exploded across the defense table. For one impossible second, he simply stared. Judge Maya Bennett entered, wearing black judicial robes and absolute composure. She walked calmly toward the bench without acknowledging him directly. But Shaw recognized her instantly. The woman from the gas station. The woman he shoved against the car. The woman he mocked in the rain. Now seated above him, beneath the seal of the United States District Court. Briggs looked physically ill. The courtroom settled slowly while Maya arranged documents before her with steady hands. "Be seated." Her voice carried effortlessly across the room. Shaw remained frozen half a second too long before dropping heavily into his chair. Nathaniel Cross noticed immediately. Experienced trial lawyers noticed everything. The county attorney leaned toward Shaw urgently. "What's wrong with you?" Shaw said nothing. Maya reviewed the opening file briefly before lifting her eyes toward the defense table for the first time. The silence stretched. Not dramatic, not emotional, simply controlled, and somehow that made it worse. The union attorney rose carefully. "Your Honor, before proceedings begin, the defense requests a brief recess for consultation." "Denied," Maya answered instantly. The attorney blinked. "Your Honor, there may be concerns affecting—" "There are no concerns preventing this hearing from proceeding." Her tone remained perfectly even. "We will address evidence and testimony today. Nothing else." Nathaniel Cross watched the exchange closely now. So did every reporter. Something had shifted inside the room. Shaw felt it collapsing around him before the hearing even began. Maya folded her hands calmly atop the bench. "Counsel, Marshal," she said, "call your first witness." Nathaniel Cross rose slowly from the plaintiff's table and buttoned his jacket with deliberate calm. Years inside federal courtrooms had taught him patience mattered more than theater. Jurors remembered drama. Judges remembered discipline. The plaintiffs called Deputy Derek Shaw. Every eye turned toward the defense table. Shaw hesitated. His attorney whispered sharply beside him, "Stand up." The deputy finally rose, though the swagger from earlier had vanished completely. He walked toward the witness stand with stiff shoulders and pale skin, avoiding Maya's eyes whenever possible. The oath sounded unusually loud in the silent courtroom. "State your name and position for the record," Cross began. "Deputy Derek Shaw, Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department." "How long have you served?" 12 years. Cross nodded once. "During those 12 years, were you regularly assigned traffic enforcement duties along Interstate 22 and Route 9 corridors?" "Yes." "And approximately how many roadside stops have you conducted during late-night patrols?" "I don't know exactly." "More than 100? "Yes." "More than 300? A pause. "Probably." Cross approached the witness stand carrying several thin folders. "Deputy Shaw, are you aware multiple citizens filed formal complaints accusing you of targeting black motorists for unlawful stops and cash seizures?" "Yes." "Did you extort money from those motorists?" "No." "Did you threaten arrest without probable cause?" "No." "Did you intentionally disable your body camera during encounters involving black drivers?" "No." The answers came quickly now, too quickly. Cross noticed. So did Maya. The attorney opened the first folder. "Let's discuss a stop from April 11th involving Marcus Reed, an Army veteran traveling home to Atlanta." Shaw shifted slightly. "Mr. Reed alleges you threatened vehicle impoundment unless he paid $800 roadside. Did that occur?" "No." Cross opened another folder. "June 2nd. Sandra Lewis, a nurse from Mobile. She claims you suggested Child Protective Services might become involved unless she cooperated financially. Did that occur?" "No." Another folder. August 9th. Lorraine Bishop from Macon, Georgia, age 68, traveling with her grandson. For the first time, Shaw's expression tightened visibly. Cross noticed again. She claims you confiscated grocery money after implying her grandson could spend the night in county custody. True or false? False. Cross walked slowly across the courtroom. Interesting, he stopped directly before the witness stand. Because all three witnesses described nearly identical language. Similar threats, similar intimidation tactics, similar demands for cash. "People talk," Shaw muttered. Cross tilted his head slightly. "Meaning?" "They hear accusations online, they copy stories." Cross remained silent several seconds. Silence inside courtrooms often frightened witnesses more than questions. Finally, he spoke again. "So your testimony today is that every complainant independently invented nearly identical allegations against you?" "Yes." "Everyone?" "Yes." Cross glanced briefly toward the bench. Maya sat perfectly still, though her attention never drifted. "Deputy Shaw," Cross continued, "how often did your body camera malfunction during stops?" "Sometimes equipment fails." "How often?" "I don't know." Cross lifted a printed report. "According to department maintenance logs, your camera experienced 14 reported failures in 11 months. "So?" "The next highest officer reported 1. A murmur spread quietly through the gallery. The union attorney immediately stood. "Objection. Counsel is editorializing." "Overruled," Maya answered calmly. "The witness may respond." Shaw looked briefly toward her before answering. "Equipment issues happen." Cross nodded slowly. "They certainly seem to happen around you." The deputy's jaw tightened. Cross placed another document onto the evidence screen. "Deputy Shaw, please read the highlighted line from your personal patrol notes dated September 14th. Shaw stared at the screen without speaking. "Read it aloud." The deputy swallowed visibly. "Blue Honda, driver nervous, settled roadside." Cross stepped closer. "What does settled roadside mean?" "A warning." "Is that official department terminology?" "No." "Then explain it." Shaw hesitated too long. Cross waited patiently. Finally, the deputy answered. It means the situation was resolved. How? No response. Cross's voice sharpened slightly for the first time all morning. How was it resolved, deputy? Shaw looked toward his attorney now. Cross pressed forward. Did the driver pay you? No. Then why write settled roadside instead of warning issued? I don't remember. Cross nodded once. Convenient. At the defense table, Briggs sat rigid and pale. Sweat glistened along his forehead despite the courthouse air conditioning. Cross noticed him too. The attorney returned to his table and picked up another document. Deputy Shaw, were you working patrol last night after 11 p.m.? The question changed everything. Shaw's eyes snapped upward immediately. Yes. Did you encounter a black woman at a gas station near Route 9? The union attorney shot upward. Objection. Relevance. Nathaniel Cross remained perfectly calm. Pattern and conduct, Your Honor. Meyer's expression never changed. Overruled. The courtroom became completely still. Cross looked directly at Shaw. Answer the question. Yes, Shaw muttered. Did she threaten you? No. Did she commit a crime? No. Did you activate your body camera during this interaction? Sarto silence. Meyer leaned slightly forward. You are under oath, Deputy Shaw. No, he finally admitted. Cross stepped closer again. And did you physically grab this woman during the encounter? The deputy's breathing changed. Every reporter in the room stopped typing for one suspended second. Yes. Cross nodded quietly. No further questions at this time. Derek Shaw remained frozen on the witness stand, while realization spread slowly across the courtroom. Something far larger than ordinary corruption testimony had just entered the record, and Meyer Bennett had not said a single unnecessary word. The union attorney rose slowly for cross-examination, though confidence no longer existed anywhere in his posture. Richard Vance had defended police officers across Alabama for nearly 20 years. He understood difficult cases. He understood hostile press. What unsettled him now was different. The room no longer trusted his client. That changed everything. Vance approached the witness stand carefully. Deputy Shaw, law enforcement officers often face dangerous uncertainty during roadside encounters, correct? Yes. And officers must make quick decisions for personal safety? Yes. Vance nodded toward the jury box. Though this was a bench hearing, habit guided experienced litigators even during chaos. So when citizens appear nervous, resistant, or argumentative, officers may reasonably escalate control measures. Yes. Nathaniel Cross remained seated silently. Vance continued. The woman you encountered last night refused identification requests, correct? Shaw glanced toward Meyer before answering. Yes. And she questioned your authority? Yes. So your physical contact was intended to maintain officer safety? Yes. Cross finally stood. Objection. Leading. Sustained, Meyer answered immediately. Vance adjusted his tie. Deputy Shaw, describe your perception of the encounter. Shaw cleared his throat. She seemed hostile. Hostile how? She kept challenging me. Vance nodded quickly. And did you intend racial discrimination? No. Did you extort anyone? No. Did you ever target black motorists specifically? No. The attorney visibly relaxed now, believing stability had returned. Then Nathaniel Cross stood again. Brief redirect, Your Honor. You may proceed. Cross approached with empty hands this time. That alone unsettled Shaw. Deputy Shaw, you testified the woman last night appeared hostile because she questioned your authority. Yes. Cross nodded. Is asking whether someone is legally detained considered hostility? Shaw hesitated. No. Is refusing voluntary identification illegal? No. Did this woman threaten you physically? No. So the hostility you described was simply confidence. Objection, Vance snapped. Overruled, Meyer answered. Cross never broke eye contact with Shaw. Deputy, did the woman insult you? No. Curse at you? No. Raise her voice? No. Cross paused. Then exactly what made her hostile? Shaw opened his mouth, but no answer came. The silence stretched painfully. Cross turned slightly toward the bench before speaking again. Deputy Shaw, do you recognize the woman from the gas station today? Every muscle in Shaw's body visibly tightened. Yes. Please identify her for the record. Richard Vance immediately stood. Objection. On what grounds? Cross asked. Vance searched desperately for footing. Relevance, prejudice, improper, overruled, Maya said quietly. The room became absolutely motionless. Cross looked back toward Shaw. Identify her. Shaw's voice nearly failed him. She's Judge Bennett. A sharp wave of whispers moved through the gallery. Reporters leaned forward instantly. One television producer hurried from the courtroom toward the hallway with a phone already pressed against his ear. Cross allowed several seconds of silence before continuing. Deputy Shaw, when you grabbed Judge Bennett last night, did you know she was a federal judge? No. Would you have treated her differently if you had known? Richard Vance shot upward again. Objection. This time Maya waited one measured beat, then she answered, overruled. The question remained hanging heavily inside the courtroom. Shaw looked trapped now. I don't know, he muttered. Cross stepped closer. But you assumed she lacked power. No. You assumed nobody important would care what happened beside that highway. No. Cross's expression hardened slightly. Then why was your body camera off? Shaw said nothing. Why was no official stop recorded? No answer. Why did your partner attempt to intervene? Shaw's breathing became uneven now. Across the room, Briggs lowered his eyes toward the floor. Cross finally turned toward the bench. No further questions. Maya folded her hands calmly. Deputy Shaw, you may step down. Shaw descended from the witness stand on visibly shaky legs. The man who entered court, boasting over coffee, barely existed anymore. Now he looked hunted. Vance leaned toward him urgently after he returned to the defense table. You should have told me, the attorney whispered harshly. Shaw stared ahead without answering. Nathaniel Cross rose again. The plaintiffs called Deputy Cole Briggs. Briggs froze instantly. For several seconds he did not move. Maya watched him carefully from the bench. Fear radiated from him openly now. Not fear of prison, not fear of reporters, fear of choosing sides. Deputy Briggs, Maya said evenly, you've been called. He stood slowly and approached the witness stand like a man walking toward surgery. The oath trembled slightly in his voice. Cross waited until Briggs settled into the chair before speaking. How long have you served with the Ocragie County Sheriff's Department? 3 years. And how long were you partnered with Deputy Shaw? Almost 1 year. Cross nodded. During that year, who usually decided which vehicles to stop? Briggs swallowed hard. Shaw. At the defense table, Derek Shaw turned sharply toward him. Cross continued. Did Deputy Shaw ever instruct you to delay body camera activation? Briggs hesitated. The entire courtroom leaned emotionally forward without moving physically. Maya recognized the exact moment conscience collided with survival. Yes, Briggs whispered. Richard Vance closed his eyes briefly. Cross's voice remained calm. What exactly did he say? Briggs looked toward Shaw involuntarily. Maya spoke immediately. Deputy Briggs, direct your answers to counsel. Briggs turned back. He said, keep cameras cold until we know who we're dealing with. Cross nodded once. And what did that mean? Briggs's face tightened with visible shame. It meant if someone looked scared, alone, or easy to pressure, he wanted room to work. A terrible silence settled across the courtroom. Then Cross asked the question that finally broke the room open. Deputy Briggs, did Derek Shaw extort money from motorists? Briggs closed his eyes. When he answered, his voice sounded exhausted. Yes. Nobody moved after Cole Briggs answered. The silence inside courtroom 7 deepened into something heavy and irreversible. Even the reporters stopped typing for one suspended moment, as if everyone understood the hearing had crossed an invisible line. Derek Shaw stared at Briggs with naked disbelief. Not anger yet, not outrage, betrayal. Nathaniel Cross remained calm beside the witness stand. Experienced trial lawyers understood dangerous testimony required space. Push too hard, and witnesses retreated into fear. Leave silence alone long enough, and truth usually continued walking forward by itself. Cross finally spoke. How many times did Deputy Shaw take money from motorists? Briggs rubbed both palms against his uniform pants. I don't know exactly. More than once? Yes. More than 5 times? Yes. More than 10? Briggs hesitated, then nodded weakly. Maya's voice interrupted gently but firmly. I need verbal responses for the record. Yes, Briggs said quietly. Across the room, Shaw muttered something under his breath. Richard Vance grabbed his arm instantly. Stop talking. Cross approached the witness stand another step. Describe how these stops usually happened. Briggs swallowed hard. Minor traffic violations mostly. Tail lights, drifting lanes, registration checks. And after the stop, Shaw would start asking questions. What kind of questions? If drivers had cash, where they were going, whether they wanted problems. The young deputy's voice weakened further with every answer. He liked isolated roads, especially late at night. He said people traveling after midnight didn't want attention. Cross nodded slowly. Did race affect which motorists he targeted? Briggs looked physically ill now. Yes. Derek Shaw suddenly shoved backward from the defense table. That's bullshit. The outburst exploded across the courtroom. Maya struck the gavel once. Deputy Shaw, her tone alone restored order. You will remain silent unless addressed directly. Is that understood? Shaw's chest rose sharply with anger, but beneath the anger now lived fear. Yes, Your Honor. Cross resumed immediately. Deputy Briggs, explain what you meant. Briggs stared toward the floor. He said black drivers were less likely to complain officially, said they avoided small-town courts because nobody listened anyway. A low murmur spread through the gallery. Lorraine Bishop sat motionless in the second row, with both hands folded tightly across her purse. Cross continued carefully. Did you ever receive money personally? Briggs closed his eyes briefly. Yes. How? Sometimes cash, sometimes Shaw covered bills for me. Why accept it? The question hit harder than the others. Briggs looked younger suddenly, smaller, ashamed. Because I was weak, he admitted. The honesty in that answer changed the atmosphere again. Cross did not interrupt. Briggs continued speaking almost automatically now. At first I told myself I wasn't really involved. Then I told myself I needed proof before reporting anything. After a while, he stopped. After a while what? I stopped pretending I was innocent. Maya watched him closely, not sympathetically, not cruelly. Judges spent years learning the difference between remorse and self-pity. Briggs looked genuinely broken. Cross picked up another document from counsel table. Deputy Briggs, directing your attention to last night's gas station encounter. Did Judge Bennett threaten either officer? No. Did she commit any crime? No. Why did Deputy Shaw confront her? Briggs hesitated too long. Answer the question, Maya said quietly. Because she was black, Briggs whispered. The words settled across the courtroom like smoke. No dramatic reaction followed, no shouting, no chaos, only recognition. Cross spoke again. What happened after she questioned him? Shaw got angry. How angry? He grabbed her arm and shoved her against the car. Did she resist? No. Did she threaten violence? No. Briggs's breathing turned uneven now. She kept asking to go home, he said softly. She looked exhausted. At the defense table, Shaw stared forward with clenched fists. Cross approached carefully. Deputy Briggs, when did you realize the woman from the gas station was the federal judge presiding over this case? When she walked into court this morning. What was Deputy Shaw's reaction? Briggs gave a hollow laugh without humor. He looked like somebody punched through his chest. Even Maya almost reacted to that description. Almost. Cross turned briefly toward the bench. No further questions. Richard Vance rose slowly for cross-examination. He already looked defeated. Still, professional instinct pushed him forward. Deputy Briggs, he began carefully, you understand you may face criminal exposure related to your testimony today? Yes. And cooperating publicly could potentially reduce consequences for you? Yes. So you possess strong personal motivation to shift blame toward Deputy Shaw. Briggs looked directly at him. I already blamed myself all night. Vance paused. That answer landed harder than expected. The attorney adjusted direction quickly. Did Deputy Shaw ever explicitly order you to break the law? Yes. Vance blinked. The room sharpened again. What exactly did he say? Briggs turned slowly toward the defense table. For the first time all morning, Shaw looked away first. He said county supervisors didn't care how things got handled as long as complaints stayed quiet. Cross smiled faintly. Hattie, Vance's shoulders visibly dropped. The defense attorney understood immediately how dangerous that statement truly was. This was no longer one corrupt deputy. Now the shadow reached upward. Maya recognized it too, and somewhere deep beneath her calm exterior, another realization settled heavily into place. The hearing had just become far larger than Derek Shaw. The courthouse hallway erupted the moment Judge Bennett called for a midday recess. Reporters flooded toward elevator banks, carrying cameras, microphones, and breaking headlines already spreading across Alabama news stations. Federal deputy extortion scandal. Officer admits racial targeting under oath. Judge personally involved in alleged misconduct. Every network wanted the story first. Inside her private chambers, Maya Bennett finally removed her glasses and leaned back carefully against the leather chair behind her desk. The room remained quiet, except for distant thunder outside the courthouse windows. Birmingham's skies had darkened again by noon. Her clerk, Emily Carter, closed the office door softly. "You should eat something," Emily said. Maya barely smiled. "That sounds ambitious right now." Emily hesitated before setting a printed news article onto the desk. They already found the gas station security footage. Maya looked up immediately. "From last night?" Emily nodded. "The station owner turned it over voluntarily this morning after reporters arrived." Maya studied the article silently. The footage reportedly showed Shaw grabbing her against the vehicle exactly as Briggs described. No audio existed. It did not matter. Visual truth carried its own language. Emily folded her arms carefully. "The Judicial Ethics Committee called twice. There it is." "You knew they would." "Yes." Maya stood slowly and walked toward the tall windows overlooking downtown Birmingham. Rain drifted sideways between office towers, while pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas far below. Emily approached cautiously. "Are you considering recusal?" The question lingered heavily. Federal judges rarely removed themselves from major civil rights cases unless absolutely necessary. Appearance mattered nearly as much as fairness itself. Maya understood that better than anyone. "I haven't decided," she answered quietly. "You know the defense will demand it." "They already plan to." Emily studied her carefully. "You also know the plaintiffs trust you." Maya looked back toward the courthouse. That was exactly the problem. Across town, inside a narrow conference room above a downtown steakhouse, Sheriff Leonard Pike crushed a cigarette into an ashtray while staring at muted television coverage of the hearing. Every screen showed Derek Shaw entering court beside headlines about corruption and racial profiling. Pike looked furious, not surprised. Furious. Richard Vance sat across from him with loosened tie and exhausted eyes. "You told me this was containable," Pike snapped. "It was until Briggs folded." "He's lying," Vance laughed bitterly. "The problem isn't whether he's lying. The problem is nobody believes your department anymore." Sheriff Pike paced toward the window. He was a heavy-set man in his 60s, with silver hair and a campaign smile built from decades of county politics. Every sheriff in rural Alabama understood the same truth. Control the narrative. Control survival. "What does Shaw say?" Pike asked. "He's panicking." "He better calm down." Vance studied the sheriff carefully now. "You knew about the roadside cash seizures." Pike stopped moving. "That accusation better end here." "It's not accusation anymore." The sheriff's face hardened. "You think I ordered extortion? I think you ignored it because complaints disappeared before elections." Pike walked slowly back toward the table. "You're paid to defend deputies, not interrogate me." Vance held his stare. "I'm paid to survive this disaster professionally." Neither man spoke afterward. The silence answered enough. Back at the courthouse, Nathaniel Cross sat alone, reviewing witness transcripts when Lorraine Bishop approached carefully with her grandson beside her. Lorraine looked older than her 68 years. Life across rural Georgia had weathered her face deeply, though strength remained visible in her posture. "Mr. Cross?" He stood immediately. "Mrs. Bishop." Her grandson held her hand tightly. I heard what that young deputy said, Lorraine whispered, about people like us staying quiet. Cross nodded. He wasn't wrong, she admitted. The words carried no bitterness, only exhaustion. Lorraine lowered herself into the nearby chair. My husband fought in Vietnam, came home believing uniforms meant protection. She stared toward the courthouse windows. After Shaw stopped us last year, my grandson asked why I handed over grocery money without arguing. The boy looked downward. Lorraine touched his shoulder gently. I told him survival sometimes sounds quieter than dignity. Cross listened silently. But this morning, she continued, that judge sat there without flinching, even after what happened to her. Nathaniel Cross followed her gaze toward the courtroom doors. Yes, he said softly, she did. At exactly 1:30, court reconvened. The atmosphere inside the courtroom had transformed completely. Now federal investigators occupied the back row. Two Department of Justice attorneys sat quietly beside them taking notes. Sheriff Leonard Pike entered moments later, and for the first time that day, Maya Bennett felt genuine danger move through the room. Not physical danger, political danger. The kind, powerful men created when survival outweighed loyalty. Richard Vance stood immediately. Your Honor, before proceedings continue, the defense formally moves for recusal. Every reporter lifted their attention instantly. Vance continued carefully. Given last evening's personal interaction involving Your Honor and Deputy Shaw, we believe impartiality may reasonably be questioned. Maya listened without expression. Cross remained seated. Vance finished quietly. The integrity of these proceedings requires reassignment. Silence settled. Maya folded both hands before her. Outside, thunder rolled across Birmingham again. Then she spoke. Counselor, are you arguing this court cannot remain impartial because your client unlawfully assaulted the presiding judge? The question landed like a blade. Vance hesitated. No, Your Honor. I'm arguing public perception. Public perception currently involves sworn testimony, documented complaints, missing footage, and multiple witnesses. Maya's voice remained perfectly measured. The defense does not receive automatic relief because misconduct accidentally reached someone with institutional authority. Pike's expression darkened immediately. Maya continued, I have reviewed judicial standards extensively during recess. I find no basis requiring recusal at this stage. Vance opened his mouth again. Maya stopped him instantly. Motion denied. A sharp wave of whispers spread across the gallery. Nathaniel Cross sat back slowly. Sheriff Pike stared at Maya with cold calculation now, and somewhere near the rear courtroom doors, one federal investigator quietly exited the room while dialing a phone. The investigation was expanding in real time. Rain finally stopped over Birmingham just before sunset, leaving the city wrapped in damp heat and restless tension. News helicopters circled above downtown, while satellite trucks crowded every available curb near the courthouse. By evening, the hearing dominated national headlines. Civil rights organizations released statements demanding federal oversight. Former prosecutors appeared on television discussing patterns of rural corruption across the Deep South. Social media flooded with blurry clips from the gas station surveillance footage. The country had seen stories like this before, but this one carried a dangerous difference. The victim was a federal judge. Inside courtroom 7, the atmosphere sharpened further after recess. Sheriff Leonard Pike sat beside the defense table now, watching every witness with the rigid stillness of a man calculating damage faster than emotion. Nathaniel Cross rose calmly. The plaintiffs call Sheriff Leonard Pike. Several reporters immediately exchanged stunned looks. Richard Vance stood halfway from his chair. Your Honor, we were not informed. Sit down, Richard, Pike muttered quietly. The sheriff rose heavily and approached the witness stand beneath flashing camera lights from the hallway beyond courtroom doors. Pike took the oath without visible concern. Unlike Shaw or Briggs, he understood power deeply enough to hide fear beneath control. Cross approached slowly. Sheriff Pike, how long have you led the Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department? 14 years? And during those 14 years, were complaints filed regarding Deputy Shaw's conduct? Yes. How many? I don't recall exact numbers. Cross lifted a binder, 23 documented complaints over 6 years. Pike barely reacted. Complaints happen in law enforcement. 23. Yes, Cross walked closer. How many resulted in formal discipline? None. Why not? Internal reviews found insufficient evidence. Cross nodded. The same internal reviews conducted by supervisors reporting directly to you? Yes. And body camera failures complicated these investigations? Yes. Cross paused deliberately. Did you ever question why Deputy Shaw's equipment malfunctioned unusually often? Pike leaned back slightly. I trusted my department technicians. Cross glanced toward Briggs briefly. Did you trust Deputy Shaw? Yes. Do you trust him today? The sheriff hesitated for the first time. That remains to be seen. Cross allowed the answer to settle. Sheriff Pike, are roadside cash seizures common practice within your department? No. Have deputies ever turned over unlogged cash after traffic stops? No. Cross opened another folder. Then perhaps you can explain these. Court staff distributed printed financial records toward the bench and defense table. Pike's expression changed immediately, subtle but unmistakable. These are internal departmental reimbursement logs, Cross explained. They show repeated unexplained cash deposits entered after overnight patrol shifts involving Deputy Shaw. Richard Vance stood quickly. Objection, Foundation. Foundation established through subpoenaed accounting records, Cross replied. Meyer reviewed the document silently. Objection overruled. Cross continued. Sheriff Pike, would you explain why thousands of dollars in undocumented currency entered departmental discretionary accounts? I'd need to review those records carefully. You've never seen them before? No. Cross stepped closer again. Interesting, because your signature appears authorizing several deposits. The courtroom tightened instantly. Pike looked toward the documents now. For the first time all day, his composure slipped. Only slightly. But enough, Cross spoke softly. Sheriff Pike, did your department profit from unlawful roadside seizures? No. Did you knowingly ignore civil rights violations because revenue benefited county operations? No, Cross nodded. Then let's discuss Deputy Briggs's testimony. Pike's jaw hardened visibly. Deputy Briggs claims supervisors discouraged complaints and protected aggressive enforcement tactics. He's lying to save himself. Did you ever investigate his concerns? He never reported concerns. Cross looked toward Briggs. Deputy Briggs submitted 2 internal memos requesting transfer from Shaw's patrol unit. Pike said nothing. Cross lifted another page. Both requests were denied personally by your office. The sheriff's silence deepened. Meyer watched him carefully. Experienced judges recognized dangerous witnesses quickly. Pike no longer looked defensive. Now he looked calculating. Cross pressed further. Sheriff Pike, were minority motorists disproportionately targeted for searches under your administration? No. Cross approached the evidence screen. According to Department of Justice traffic analysis, black drivers represented 70% of vehicle searches conducted by your department, despite composing less than 20% of county traffic patterns. A stunned murmur rolled through the gallery. Pike shifted slightly. Statistics don't tell full stories. Cross answered instantly. Sometimes they tell exactly the story people spent years avoiding. Silence followed. Then Meyer spoke. Sheriff Pike, answer counsel directly. Pike looked toward her, and in that moment Meyer finally saw it clearly. Not simple corruption, not isolated racism. Entitlement, the quiet certainty that systems existed to protect certain men forever. Pike answered slowly. Enforcement patterns reflected crime reports. Cross smiled faintly. Crime reports generated by whom? Pike did not answer. Cross turned toward the bench. No further questions at this time. Richard Vance rose again for redirect, though exhaustion weighed visibly across his face. Sheriff Pike, he began carefully, would you describe Oak Ridge County as a difficult area for law enforcement? Yes. Drug trafficking? Yes. Violent crime? Yes. So deputies sometimes operate under intense pressure, protecting local communities? Yes. Vance nodded toward the bench. And mistakes may occur without criminal intent? Before Pike could answer, a courtroom deputy entered quietly from the side door and approached Maya with a sealed document. She read it silently. Her expression did not change. But Nathaniel Cross noticed something sharpen behind her eyes. "So ordered," Maya said softly. Then she looked toward Sheriff Pike. "Counselor, your witness may step down." Pike frowned slightly. Maya continued. "This court has received notice that the United States Attorney's Office has opened a federal criminal investigation into Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department operations." The room exploded into noise. Reporters surged toward phones. Richard Vance sat heavily into his chair. Sheriff Pike remained frozen beside the witness stand. And Derek Shaw suddenly understood the system protecting him was beginning to collapse from above. By 8 o'clock that evening, Birmingham felt electrified. Crowds gathered outside the federal courthouse despite the humid southern heat. Protesters carried handmade signs demanding accountability, while television crews broadcast live beneath glaring floodlights. Police barricades lined the sidewalks. Nobody trusted the situation anymore. Inside her chambers, Maya Bennett removed her judicial robe slowly and sat alone beside the darkened window overlooking downtown traffic. The city glowed beneath drifting clouds while distant sirens echoed through wet streets. Exhaustion settled deep into her bones now. Not physical exhaustion, moral exhaustion, the kind carried by people who spent decades fighting battles society pretended were already solved. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Nathaniel Cross entered carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. "You still working?" he asked. Maya accepted the cup carefully. "Apparently democracy doesn't sleep." Cross smiled faintly. For several moments they simply stood quietly beside the window. Outside, reporters shouted questions toward anyone entering the courthouse. Cross finally spoke. "You handled today better than most judges could." Maya gave a tired laugh. "I'm not sure that's true." "It is." She looked down at the untouched coffee. "He grabbed me because he thought nobody important would care." Cross remained silent. "That realization keeps replaying in my head," she continued quietly. "Not because I'm unique, because I'm not." The room softened around the truth of that sentence. Cross leaned against the desk. "My father grew up outside Jackson, Mississippi," he said. "Army veteran, Bronze Star. One night in 1971, a deputy pulled him over driving home from work." Maya listened carefully. "He came home bleeding from the mouth because he asked why he was stopped." Cross stared toward the courthouse ceiling. "He told me something years later I never forgot. Said humiliation survives longer than pain." Maya nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "It does." A sharp knock interrupted them again. Emily Carter entered looking pale. "You need to see this immediately." She handed Maya a printed article from an Atlanta news station. The headline froze the room. "Former Oak Ridge deputy found dead outside Mobile home." Cross read quickly. The former deputy, Raymond Hale, retired 2 years earlier after filing private complaints against departmental misconduct. Authorities reported an apparent suicide. Nathaniel Cross looked up immediately. "When did this happen?" "About an hour ago," Emily answered. Maya's expression hardened. "Was he scheduled to testify?" Emily nodded. "Tomorrow morning." Silence swallowed the room. Cross took the article slowly. "Do investigators believe it was suicide?" Emily hesitated. "They aren't saying publicly." But her face answered enough. Across town, Sheriff Leonard Pike sat alone inside his office, beneath fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. Every television station now carried his department's scandal non-stop. Campaign donors stopped answering calls. County commissioners avoided him entirely. The walls were closing. Derek Shaw entered without knocking. He looked terrible, wrinkled uniform, bloodshot eyes, hands trembling slightly beneath forced control. "You told me nobody would fold," Shaw snapped. Pike remained seated. "You need to calm down." Briggs flipped. "Federal investigators are everywhere. Reporters found the gas station footage." Pike lit another cigarette slowly. "Panicking won't save you." Shaw stared at him. "You knew about the cash." Pike exhaled smoke calmly. "You took the money. We shared it." The sheriff's eyes sharpened instantly. Careful, Shaw laughed bitterly. That judge destroyed everything in one day. No, Pike answered coldly. You destroyed everything because you got sloppy. The words hung heavily. Shaw stepped closer. You think they'll stop with me? Pike said nothing. That silence frightened Shaw more than shouting would have. Back at the courthouse, Maya sat reviewing Raymond Hale's personnel records while Cross studied old complaint files spread across the conference table. Patterns emerged everywhere now. Missing evidence, disappearing complaints, unreported cash, threatened witnesses, years of quiet abuse hidden beneath ordinary traffic stops. Emily looked toward Maya carefully. Do you think Hale was murdered? Maya closed the file slowly. I think frightened institutions become dangerous. Cross nodded grimly. At nearly midnight, Maya finally prepared to leave chambers. As she exited through the secured underground parking structure, 2 federal agents approached from beside a black SUV. Judge Bennett, she stopped immediately. The older agent showed credentials. Special Agent Victor Ramirez, FBI Public Corruption Task Force. Maya studied him carefully. We need to discuss your safety, Ramirez said. My safety? We intercepted communications suggesting potential witness intimidation connected to the Oak Ridge investigation. The parking garage suddenly felt colder. Maya folded her arms. You believe I'm being threatened? Ramirez chose his words carefully. We believe several individuals connected to this case are becoming desperate. The younger agent opened the SUV door. We'd strongly prefer you accept temporary federal protection. Maya looked across the empty garage where fluorescent lights reflected against concrete floors. For the first time since the gas station encounter, genuine fear touched her chest. Not fear for reputation, not fear of public scrutiny, fear of what desperate men protected by broken systems might still attempt. Then Ramirez handed her a sealed evidence envelope. This arrived anonymously tonight. Maya opened it carefully. Inside rested a single flash drive. No label, no note, only one typed sentence folded beneath it. The sheriff kept records of everything. The FBI safe house sat outside Birmingham near a quiet stretch of wooded highway where nobody asked questions and neighbors minded their own business. The property looked ordinary from the outside. Small brick home, white shutters, faded mailbox near the road. Ordinary appearances protected important people. Just after 1 in the morning, Maya Bennett sat at a kitchen table beneath dim lighting, while Special Agent Victor Ramirez inserted the anonymous flash drive into a secured government laptop. Nathaniel Cross stood nearby with folded arms. Nobody spoke while encrypted folders slowly opened across the screen. Then the room changed. Financial spreadsheets appeared first. Dates, vehicle descriptions, license plate numbers, cash amounts, years of records. Cross leaned forward immediately. My God! Ramirez clicked through additional files, scanned complaint forms marked unresolved, private departmental memos, photographs of confiscated cash, and one folder labeled County Contributions. Ramirez opened it carefully. Inside sat payment logs connected to local political campaigns, judges, commissioners, state legislators. Maya felt coldness settle into her stomach. This reaches farther than the sheriff's department, she said quietly. Ramirez nodded. Much farther. One document immediately caught Cross's attention. He enlarged it slowly. Signed reimbursement approvals connected Sheriff Pike directly to undocumented roadside seizures dating back nearly 8 years. This is organized, Cross muttered. Not random corruption. Institutional. Ramirez continued scrolling. Then another file appeared. Body camera footage. Hundreds of clips. Most lasted only seconds before abrupt deactivation. But several videos remained intact. Ramirez clicked one. A terrified young black man appeared on screen beside a roadside shoulder at night. Derek Shaw's voice filled the kitchen. You got 2 choices tonight, county jail or cooperation. The driver asked shakily what cooperation meant. Shaw answered calmly. Depends how badly you want freedom. The recording ended abruptly. Nobody moved afterward. Maya closed her eyes briefly. Cross stared toward the dark kitchen window. How many lives did this poison? He whispered. Ramirez answered honestly, probably more than we'll ever document. At sunrise, federal agents raided Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department. News helicopters captured armored vehicles surrounding the station while stunned deputies exited with raised hands. Reporters crowded behind barricades broadcasting live nationwide. Sheriff Leonard Pike was arrested at 7:13 a.m. Derek Shaw disappeared before sunrise. By mid-morning, every law enforcement agency across Alabama received active bulletins searching for him. Inside the federal courthouse, tension reached dangerous levels. Crowds packed every hallway. Some demanded justice, some defended the department, some simply wanted spectacle. Maya Bennett entered through secured corridors surrounded by federal marshals. The bruise along her arm had faded slightly beneath makeup, but the emotional weight beneath it remained sharp. Court convened at 10 o'clock exactly. Nathaniel Cross stood first. Your Honor, given overnight developments, plaintiffs request emergency expansion of federal oversight proceedings. Before Maya could answer, Richard Vance rose slowly. His face looked hollow. The defense cannot currently locate Deputy Shaw. Whispers exploded instantly. Maya struck the gavel once. Order, Vance continued carefully. Sheriff Pike has been taken into federal custody. Several deputies invoked constitutional protections this morning. My clients request temporary suspension pending criminal review. Cross answered immediately. Respectfully, delay only protects remaining evidence from public accountability. Maya listened silently. Then a courtroom deputy hurried toward the bench, carrying another sealed message. She read it. Her expression changed almost invisibly. But Nathaniel Cross noticed. Your Honor. Maya looked toward the courtroom. This court has received confirmation that former Deputy Raymond Hale's death has officially been ruled homicide. The room erupted. Federal marshals immediately moved toward exits as shouting spread through the gallery. Maya's voice cut sharply across the chaos. Order! Silence returned slowly. Cross looked stunned. Vance looked terrified, and somewhere deep inside the courtroom's emotional collapse, Maya recognized a terrible truth. Someone was trying to erase witnesses. Before proceedings could continue, a marshal entered quickly through the rear courtroom doors and approached Ramirez in the back row. The FBI agent stood immediately. Their conversation lasted less than 10 seconds, then Ramirez looked directly toward Maya. She understood instantly something had happened. Ramirez approached the bench carefully. Your Honor, we need a brief recess. The urgency in his voice changed the entire room. Maya nodded once. This court stands in recess for 15 minutes. The gavel struck. Inside chambers moments later, Ramirez closed the door securely before speaking. We found Shaw. Alive? Maya asked. Yes. Where? Ramirez hesitated. In Atlanta. Cross frowned. Doing what? The FBI agent looked directly at Maya. He contacted federal authorities personally. Nobody spoke. Ramirez continued. He wants immunity in exchange for testimony. Cross laughed bitterly. Of course he does. But Ramirez wasn't finished. He claims Sheriff Pike ordered witness intimidation operations personally. Maya's expression hardened. And Raymond Hale? Ramirez answered carefully. Shaw says Hale planned to release financial records publicly last month. The room fell silent again. Then Ramirez delivered the sentence that changed everything once more. He also claims 2 sitting state officials received money directly from roadside seizure funds. Cross slowly lowered himself into a chair. Corruption no longer lived at county level. Now it reached into state government. Maya walked toward the window overlooking crowded courthouse steps below. The system was cracking open publicly now, and every powerful person connected to it had become dangerous. The rain returned to Birmingham before noon, drumming against courthouse windows while protesters crowded beneath umbrellas outside federal barricades. Television commentators called the Oak Ridge scandal one of the largest public corruption cases Alabama had faced in decades. Inside chambers, Maya Bennett reviewed immunity protocols while federal attorneys argued quietly across a conference table. Nobody agreed on Derek Shaw. Some prosecutors wanted immediate cooperation. Others wanted him prosecuted without compromise. Nathaniel Cross stood near the back wall, listening with visible frustration. He terrorized innocent people for years, one attorney argued. Immunity sends the wrong message. And if his testimony exposes statewide corruption, another countered. Cross finally spoke. You're debating legal strategy. Victims are debating whether justice exists at all. The room quieted. Maya understood both sides. That was the burden judges carried. Law rarely arrived cleanly. Sometimes truth emerged through damaged people offering testimony for selfish reasons. Special Agent Ramirez entered moments later, holding a thick evidence binder. We completed preliminary review of the flash drive records. He placed photographs across the table. Campaign finance transfers, bank withdrawals, unreported cash deposits. The corruption web expanded across 3 states now: Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana. Several officials already resigned quietly overnight. Ramirez looked toward Maya. There's something else. His tone changed the room immediately. We recovered deleted emails from Sheriff Pike's office. He opened the binder. One message contained only a single sentence. Keep the judge quiet until after the hearing. Maya felt the air leave her chest slowly. Cross stepped closer. When was it sent? 2 hours after the gas station encounter. Nobody spoke. The implication settled heavily between them. Sheriff Pike learned her identity almost immediately and reacted. Cross's jaw tightened visibly. You think Shaw contacted Pike after the stop? Ramirez nodded. That's our current theory. Maya stared at the message silently, not fear this time, clarity. The gas station encounter had never been random after all. Once Shaw realized who she was, the danger escalated instantly. Across town, inside a secured FBI field office, Derek Shaw sat alone in an interrogation room beneath harsh fluorescent lighting. He looked nothing like the confident deputy from the gas station. No uniform, no swagger, only exhaustion and fear. 2 federal prosecutors entered carrying folders thick with evidence. Shaw looked up immediately. You protecting me or charging me? One prosecutor sat carefully across from him. That depends whether you start telling the truth. Shaw laughed bitterly. You already know the truth. Not all of it. The prosecutor opened a file. Who killed Raymond Hale? Shaw looked away instantly. The silence answered enough. Sheriff Pike ordered somebody to scare him, Shaw muttered finally. I don't know who pulled the trigger. Who carried out intimidation work for Pike? Shaw rubbed trembling hands together. Retired deputies mostly. Loyal people. And the judge? Shaw closed his eyes. I swear I didn't know who she was that night. That stopped mattering after you found out. Shaw's breathing changed. He panicked, he admitted softly. Pike said if a federal judge filed complaints, everything would collapse. The prosecutor leaned forward. What did Pike instruct you to do? Shaw swallowed hard. Watch her, learn whether she planned public accusations before court. Did you? No. Why not? For the first time, genuine emotion crossed Shaw's face. Because after court started, I realized how small I actually was. Back inside courtroom 7, spectators packed every available seat as proceedings resumed. The atmosphere felt heavier now. Less outrage, more reckoning. Maya entered beneath absolute silence. Nathaniel Cross rose immediately. Your Honor, plaintiffs request emergency testimony from federal investigators regarding active obstruction concerns. Granted, Special Agent Ramirez approached the witness stand. His testimony lasted nearly 90 minutes. Systemic corruption, financial fraud, witness intimidation, possible homicide conspiracy. Each revelation deepened public shock further. Then Cross asked the question hanging over everyone. Agent Ramirez, based on evidence reviewed thus far, do you believe Oak Ridge County law enforcement operated as a criminal enterprise? Ramirez answered without hesitation. Yes. A collective reaction swept through the courtroom. Maya watched faces carefully. Victims looked vindicated, deputies looked shattered, reporters looked overwhelmed. America had seen corruption before, but hearing it described plainly under oath carried different weight. Richard Vance no longer objected much. Even he understood the defense had collapsed beyond recovery. As Ramirez stepped down from the witness stand, a marshal hurried toward Maya again with urgent paperwork. The pattern itself now felt ominous. She reviewed the document carefully, then looked toward counsel. This court has received notification from the governor's office. The room sharpened immediately. Maya continued. Two sitting state officials named within federal investigative materials have resigned effective immediately. Gasps spread through the gallery. Nathaniel Cross lowered his head briefly. Years of hidden corruption were detonating in public all at once. Then Maya noticed movement near the rear courtroom doors. A woman stood quietly beside federal marshals. Mid-40s, plain clothes, nervous posture. Ramirez approached the bench quickly. "She just arrived voluntarily," he whispered. "Who is she?" Maya asked. Ramirez glanced toward the woman. Sheriff Pike's former accountant. Maya's eyes narrowed slightly. Ramirez continued. "She says she kept copies of every financial ledger." The courtroom suddenly felt much smaller, and somewhere beneath the thunder outside Birmingham, the final structure protecting Oak Ridge County began collapsing completely. The woman waiting near the courtroom doors introduced herself in a trembling voice. "Angela Mercer." She looked exhausted beyond sleep. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, while both hands clutched a worn leather folder tightly against her chest. Years of fear seemed folded into the way she stood. Federal marshals escorted her carefully toward chambers, while reporters shouted questions from behind barricades. Did she work for Sheriff Pike? Did she know about missing money? Was she under protection? Angela answered nothing. Inside chambers, Maya Bennett studied her quietly across the conference table. "Ms. Mercer," Maya said gently, "you're safe here." Angela almost laughed. "With respect, Judge, nobody connected to this case feels safe anymore." The honesty in her voice silenced the room. Nathaniel Cross sat beside Maya, while Special Agent Ramirez opened the leather folder carefully. Inside rested handwritten ledgers dating back nearly a decade. Amounts, initials, locations, political donations, cash distributions, every page deepened the corruption trail. Angela folded trembling hands together. "I handled bookkeeping for the sheriff's office 16 years, she said softly. "At first, I thought the numbers were just sloppy accounting." "When did you realize otherwise?" Cross asked. "When deputies started bringing envelopes instead of reports." Ramirez looked up immediately. "Describe the envelopes." "Cash mostly, sometimes photographs, sometimes complaint files." Maya leaned slightly forward. "And Sheriff Pike approved this personally?" Angela nodded. "He called it community protection money." Cross's expression hardened. "Protection from what?" Angela stared toward the table. "Public embarrassment." The room fell quiet again. Angela continued slowly. "People complained sometimes, especially black families traveling through the county, but complaints disappeared if settlements happened quietly." "Settlements?" Maya asked. Angela's voice weakened further. "Threats mostly, sometimes cash offers, sometimes arrests." Ramirez exchanged a grim look with Cross. The machinery of corruption was finally exposing itself completely. Angela reached deeper into the folder and removed a smaller notebook. This mattered most to Pike. Ramirez opened it carefully. Campaign contributions, judicial races, county commissioner elections, state senate donations. Every entry connected back toward unexplained cash movement. Cross exhaled slowly. He built influence using stolen money. Angela nodded. He said power protected everybody willing to stay loyal. Maya studied her carefully. "Why come forward now?" Angela looked directly at her for the first time. "Because Raymond Hale died." The answer landed heavily. Angela's eyes filled suddenly. "He warned me months ago this would end violently if nobody stopped Pike." "Did he fear for his life?" Ramirez asked. "Yes." "Did you?" Angela gave a broken smile. "I still do." Outside the courthouse, evening crowds grew larger beneath flashing police lights. Demonstrators filled entire city blocks now. Some carried American flags beside signs demanding federal reform. Others carried photographs. Victims, family members, people stopped, threatened, humiliated, and forgotten for years. The scandal no longer belonged only to Alabama. National attention had transformed Oak Ridge County into a symbol. Inside a federal detention center 40 miles away, Sheriff Leonard Pike sat alone inside a holding cell, watching coverage through muted television screens. Every channel showed his face. Corrupt sheriff, civil rights violations, witness intimidation, possible conspiracy charges. The empire he built over 14 years was dissolving publicly in less than 4 days. A corrections officer approached the bars. "You got a visitor." Pike frowned. "Lawyer?" The officer shook his head. "No, sir." Moments later, Derek Shaw entered the visitation room, escorted by federal agents. Pike's face darkened instantly. "You little bastard." Shaw sat slowly across the glass divider. "You left me exposed." Pike leaned toward the receiver. "You folded." Shaw laughed bitterly. "You taught me survival mattered more than loyalty." The sheriff's eyes sharpened dangerously. "You think they'll protect you forever?" "No," Shaw admitted, "but at least I stopped lying to myself." Pike stared at him with cold hatred. Then Shaw asked the question waiting between them. "Did you order Hale killed?" Silence. Long, heavy. Finally, Pike answered quietly, "I ordered discipline." Shaw slowly lowered his eyes. That answer was enough. Back at the courthouse, Maya prepared for the next morning's hearing while reviewing Angela Mercer's records late into the night. Patterns repeated everywhere. Not just racism, not just corruption, dependency, poor counties funding operations through fear, politicians protecting systems benefiting their campaigns, officers learning cruelty carried rewards instead of consequences. America had built these cycles repeatedly across generations. Now, one courtroom was forcing the country to watch. Emily Carter entered quietly carrying fresh coffee. "You should rest eventually," she said. Maya smiled faintly. "That would require my brain cooperating." Emily hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else." Maya looked up. "The Attorney General requested a call tonight." Maya immediately understood the significance. Federal leadership rarely contacted sitting judges directly during active proceedings. "About what?" Emily lowered her voice. "He wants to discuss creating a national civil rights task force using this case as foundation." Maya leaned back slowly. The realization settled heavily across her chest. Oak Ridge County was no longer merely a criminal investigation. Now it threatened to become a national turning point. Then Emily handed Maya another sealed envelope delivered anonymously minutes earlier. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside rested a single photograph. Maya stared at it silently. The picture showed her father in Air Force uniform outside a small Alabama diner in 1968. Beside him stood a younger Leonard Pike. Both men looked barely 20 years old, and written across the back in faded ink were 5 chilling words. "Your father knew the truth." Maya Bennett stared at the photograph for nearly a full minute before speaking. The room around her seemed to disappear. Her father stood smiling beside a young Leonard Pike outside a roadside diner somewhere in rural Alabama during the summer of 1968. Both wore military uniforms. Both looked proud, hopeful, young men before history hardened them differently. Emily Carter watched Maya carefully. "You knew they served together?" Maya nodded slowly. "Air Force Security Unit outside Biloxi before Vietnam deployments." Nathaniel Cross looked up from the case files. "You never mentioned a connection." "I didn't know there still was one." Maya turned the photograph over again. "Your father knew the truth." The sentence felt less like a threat than a wound reopening across decades. "My father died when I was 23, Maya said quietly. "Heart attack. We never discussed Pike much." Cross leaned forward. "But they stayed connected after military service?" "I honestly don't know." For the first time since the hearing began, uncertainty touched Maya personally. Not legal uncertainty, not political uncertainty, family uncertainty. Ramirez entered chambers moments later, carrying additional federal files. "We identified the diner in the photograph," he said immediately, "outside Montgomery, closed in the 70s. Maya handed him the picture. "Can you determine who mailed this?" "We're trying." Ramirez paused while studying the image. "Judge Bennett, there's another development." His expression carried unusual gravity. "Derek Shaw requested direct testimony tomorrow morning." Cross frowned instantly. "Public testimony?" "Yes." "Why?" Maya asked. Ramirez answered carefully. "He says there's something only you should hear personally." The room fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled again across Birmingham's skyline. The next morning, the courthouse resembled a national emergency zone. Federal vehicles lined entire streets. News crews occupied rooftops. Protesters filled every nearby sidewalk. Nobody remembered the last time Birmingham attracted this level of national attention. Inside courtroom 7, spectators packed every available seat before sunrise. Victims sat beside reporters. Former deputies sat beside federal investigators. The emotional atmosphere felt almost sacred now. People understood history was shifting in real time. At exactly 9 o'clock, Maya Bennett entered the courtroom. Absolute silence followed her. She looked calm outwardly. Only Emily Carter noticed Maya's hands trembling slightly beneath the bench. Nathaniel Cross rose first. "Your Honor, plaintiffs call Derek Shaw." Every eye turned immediately. Shaw entered escorted by federal marshals wearing civilian clothing and visible protective restraints beneath his jacket. He looked older overnight. Fear and shame aged people quickly. The oath sounded heavier this time, not procedural, personal. Cross approached carefully. "Mr. Shaw, you requested this testimony voluntarily." "Yes." "Why?" Shaw glanced briefly toward Maya. "Because too many people already died protecting lies." The courtroom remained perfectly still. Cross nodded once. "Did Sheriff Pike oversee unlawful roadside extortion operations?" "Yes." "Did county officials know?" "Yes." "Did state officials benefit financially?" "Yes." Shaw answered without hesitation now, like a man finally too exhausted to hide. Cross continued. "Did Pike order intimidation against witnesses?" "Yes." "Did he order surveillance involving Judge Bennett?" "Yes." Maya's expression remained unreadable. Cross stepped closer. "Why was Judge Bennett targeted specifically?" Shaw swallowed hard. "Because Pike recognized her name immediately." The courtroom sharpened instantly. Cross looked toward Maya briefly before continuing. "How?" "Because of her father." Silence crashed across the room. Maya felt her chest tighten. Cross spoke carefully now. "Explain." Shaw looked toward the witness stand microphone. "Back in the 60s, Pike and Judge Bennett's father served together. Pike used to talk about him sometimes after drinking." Maya remained motionless. "He said Judge Bennett's father threatened to expose corruption years ago involving local deputies harassing black servicemen near Montgomery." Cross frowned. "What happened?" Shaw's voice lowered. "Pike claimed military investigators buried it quietly." Maya's breathing slowed deliberately. A lifetime of fragments suddenly rearranged themselves painfully inside her memory. Her father's silences, his distrust of small-town police, the anger hidden beneath his discipline. Cross continued softly. "Did Pike fear Judge Bennett because of that history?" "Yes." "Why?" Shaw looked directly at Maya now. "Because Pike believed her father kept evidence before he died." A stunned murmur spread through the gallery. Cross spoke again. "What kind of evidence?" Shaw hesitated, then answered. "Names, payments, assault complaints, military records." Maya finally spoke for the first time during testimony. "Did Sheriff Pike ever say where those records were?" Shaw nodded slowly. "Yes." The courtroom leaned emotionally forward. Shaw's voice almost failed him. "He said your father hid them somewhere nobody would ever search." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Shaw looked down briefly, then back toward her. "In your mother's church outside Montgomery." The room exploded into noise. Reporters surged upward. Federal agents moved instantly. Nathaniel Cross stared at Maya in disbelief. And somewhere deep beneath decades of silence, Maya Bennett realized her father may have spent his entire life protecting evidence meant for this exact moment. By late afternoon, federal agents surrounded the small Baptist church outside Montgomery, where Maya Bennett's mother once sang in the Sunday choir. Rain clouds drifted low across rural Alabama, while news helicopters circled overhead like restless birds. The church looked untouched by time, white wooden walls, a rusted bell tower, handmade pews polished by generations of working families. Maya stepped from the government SUV slowly, staring at the building that her parents once called sacred. Nathaniel Cross walked beside her through wet grass toward the entrance. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "No," Maya admitted, "but I'm steady." That answer mattered more. Inside, the church smelled faintly of pine wood and old hymn books. Dust floated through colored light shining across narrow stained glass windows. Special Agent Ramirez approached near the altar. "We found something beneath storage flooring." He led them toward a hidden compartment concealed under warped wooden boards behind the choir platform. Inside rested a sealed military lockbox covered in decades of dust. Maya stopped breathing briefly. Her father's initials were carved faintly into the metal. E.B. Ramirez opened the box carefully while federal photographers documented everything. The contents silenced the room. Photographs, military reports, signed witness statements, cash ledgers, and cassette recordings. Dozens of them. Cross lifted one carefully. "Jesus." Ramirez examined a military memorandum. "Your father documented assaults against black servicemen by local deputies between 1968 and 1971. Maya stood motionless. Every unanswered silence from childhood suddenly carried meaning. Her father had not been bitter. He had been burdened. Another agent inserted one cassette into a portable player. Static filled the sanctuary briefly, then a younger male voice emerged. Elias Bennett. Maya closed her eyes instantly. "If anyone hears this recording," her father said calmly, "it means I failed to expose them publicly." The church remained perfectly still. Her father continued. "These men wore uniforms and badges while humiliating black servicemen returning home from Vietnam. Some officers stole money, some used violence. Local officials protected them because political careers depended on silence." Cross lowered his head. Maya's hands trembled slightly. "I gathered evidence quietly because witnesses feared retaliation," Elias Bennett said. "If these records survive, then someday somebody finally chose courage over comfort." The tape clicked softly before ending. Nobody spoke afterward, not immediately. The weight of decades settled across the church like grief itself. Maya walked slowly toward the front pew where her mother once prayed every Sunday morning. Rain tapped gently against stained glass while federal agents continued cataloging evidence behind her. Cross approached carefully. "Your father knew this day might come." Maya nodded slowly. He spent his entire life waiting for America to listen. 3 weeks later, federal indictments spread across Alabama and Georgia. Sheriff Leonard Pike faced charges including racketeering, civil rights violations, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and homicide facilitation. Multiple state officials resigned permanently. Several deputies accepted plea agreements. Derek Shaw received reduced sentencing after extensive cooperation, though public anger followed him everywhere afterward. Nothing erased what he had done. But truth finally entered public record. National hearings on police accountability followed that summer in Washington, D.C. Maya Bennett testified before Congress beside victims from Oak Ridge County and families destroyed by years of quiet corruption. America argued fiercely afterward. Some called the investigation overdue justice. Others called it political theater. But nobody could claim ignorance anymore. One October evening, months after the final convictions, Maya returned alone to the church outside Montgomery. Autumn leaves drifted across the cemetery behind the building where her parents rested beneath matching gray stones. The air smelled of rain and pine. She carried no cameras, no security detail, only flowers. Maya stood quietly before her father's grave while fading sunlight moved through tall Alabama trees. "You were right," she whispered. "Not about corruption, not about fear, about endurance. Systems survived through silence, but dignity survived through witnesses. For years, frightened people along forgotten highways believed nobody powerful would ever care what happened to them. Then one exhausted black woman stopped at a gas station after midnight and refused to lower her eyes. Far away, church bells rang softly through evening air. Maya smiled through tears for the first time in months. Not because justice felt complete. Justice never truly completed itself. But because truth finally stepped into daylight where future generations could no longer pretend not to see it. And sometimes that was how history changed. Not through perfect heroes, not through easy victories. Through ordinary people deciding fear would no longer write the ending. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.